This video is for the final exam review, the old school worksheet, the one with handwriting on it. That's why it's called old school, back in the day before we had the fancy computers. Just because I wanted to hit some important concepts and have a quick review. A couple things that maybe not figured out yet. Do I really review for an exam? I haven't in the past. Just remember that 40% of your grade comes from each 9 weeks score, and then 20% comes from your final exam. That means if you want to think about it this way, if 9 weeks is 40, that means a final exam is worth 4.5 weeks. Think about 4.5 weeks of work, and we're not trying to scare you here, but just make you understand that you really need to do some problems there, okay? So I'm going to go through the answers here. You already did these problems, hopefully. If not, you're just filling in some of the blanks. So a lot of error analysis kind of things to get you thinking about concepts. You've practiced enough problems. So when we have a system of equations, it's already graphed here. And so we look at what the solution is. The solution is where they intersect, right there. And so that is the point 2, 3. So that's the answer here. Remember, there's not brackets around it because it's a point. The equation of the lines is just to review the equation of a line. You need to know the y-intercept and the slope. Well, the slope here happens to be 3/2 for line 1. And the y-intercept is 0. So there's your equation, so you don't need that 0 there. And the slope of the other line is down 1 to the right 2, so that's -1/2 x, and the y-intercept is 1, 2, 3, 4, plus 4. So just reviewing that comes up in every math class. It's worth knowing and reviewing. You're going to use it with inequalities as well. Okay, the second question here, what is the error? Very common mistake. They're trying to solve using systems using elimination method. And so right here is the error. -5 and -5 is not 0. So the error there is that they needed to multiply the second equation by -1 to solve this system. And then they could actually eliminate that term. So you'd actually have -22y equals -12. And then solve from there. That's a fraction answer. Just an example to see where. So this one says solve. Sometimes it'll tell you how to solve. If I see one like this, I usually solve by substitution, which tends to give people problems. People seem to be better at elimination. So to solve by substitution, you rewrite the original equation, and instead of having y there, you put in y here. So now I can solve. Now I only have one variable. I can solve the equation. So 3x, and then I distribute, plus 6x plus 4 equals -23. Combine like terms before you keep going. Running out of room a little bit, but I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So I have 9x equals -27. X would be -3. So that's the first coordinate of your solution. Sometimes the problem is going to ask you for both coordinates, sometimes it's going to ask you for one or the other. To find the y coordinate, I go back to this equation, -3 times -3 minus 2. That's 9 minus 2, which is 7. And you can check it in the first equation to see if it works. It says write a system that goes along with the picture. Kind of thinking backwards here. Instead of them giving you a system, you're going to write a system. So I know that I'm above this line. That's greater than. And so I know that's a solid line. So it's going to be greater than or equal to. So I need to find the slope and the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is -1. And the slope is up 1 to the right 3. So that's +1/3. I go to the next equation, and I know it's above that one to get my answer. So that means it's greater than. It's a dashed line, so it's not greater than or equal to. And the y-intercept there is 4. And the slope is down 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right 2. So down 4 to the right 2. So y is greater than negative 2x plus 4. Keep going here. Again, find the errors. When you find the errors, you tend to do a little higher level thinking. So that's why we have this problem. So 2x minus y is less than or equal to 6. I'm going to subtract 2x. And then negative y is less than or equal to negative 2x plus 6. I'm dividing everything by negative 1. So y, now this, because I divided by a negative, I have to change the inequality. So the only thing they did wrong was they didn't change the inequality, which means the graph would be here. And so they solved the equation wrong, which makes that graphing error. I think this was supposed to come out without an equal sign, but it showed up on there with an equal sign. If there was no equal sign, this would be dashed and not dotted. Okay, the next one, another error analysis question. Very common error, because we've been multiplying a lot of binomials together, is to forget that we're just adding. So if we're adding, we just want to combine like terms. So I have those two like terms, and I have these two are like terms. So I get 5x plus 3. I don't multiply those together. If you would have multiplied them, that actually was right, but there's an addition sign. So pay attention to your signs there. These questions show up a lot on the weekly reviews. So if you've been doing them, this is not a hard question. If you haven't, maybe this is a little more difficult. So perimeter, they give you equation for perimeter. Perimeter is the outside. So I have 2 of the 2x minus 3's, and I have 2 of the 3x plus 5's. So 4x minus 6 plus 6x plus 10, combine like terms, 10x plus 4. That is an expression for the perimeter. Area of a rectangle would be length times width. And we don't know what the length and width are, but we have an expression for them. 2x minus 3, 3x plus 5. It's a good time to use your FOIL or distribute twice. First, outside, inside, and last. And then you can always combine your outside and inside. So all I'm doing is writing an expression. Can't solve anything. There's no equal sign. I can't solve. Okay, so factoring problems. Let's find the error here again. Again, very common error. You see a perfect square here and you see a perfect square here, but this is not a minus sign. So the only thing I could do is take out the greatest common factor, which there isn't one. So this is prime. It means only divisible by itself in 1. There are no common factors. Second one, they're supposed to find or factor this one as well. And so 2x and x is right. 3 and negative 4 is right. Gives me negative 12. But what happens is people did not check sometimes the middle term. That's negative 8 plus 3. That's negative 5. So they have the signs backwards. So when you guess and check, it's called guess and check because you're actually supposed to check to make sure that your middle term is correct. Stats, this is the most recent thing we've done. One of the little hints that I gave my students is to take and make a kind of like a little blob around the dots. And the tighter the blob, the stronger the correlation. So I'm going to look at these. First of all, I know this is positive, this is negative, because it's decreasing. This is negative, this is positive. So when I go to match up the R values, the closer to -1 means I'm negative and the dots are close together. Closer to +1. So I'm going to look at this first one's positive. A is positive, and the dots are pretty close together. So I find the one that's closest to 1 there. That's my answer. For B, the dots are not as close together, but it is positive. So I have these two choices. They're still, you could still tell a line there, so I'm going to pick 0.57. So I'm done with those two. These are both negative, so I can eliminate any other positive choices. I'm going to start out with D because it's really pretty close together. So I'm going to pick -0.98. Perfect line would be -1. -0.8, also pretty close, but it wouldn't be quite as close together. Probably you won't have to decide between two things that are that close. So what I have left for this one is -0.8 and -0.03. Well, this would be basically a bunch of dots. You couldn't tell anything. So I'm going with -0.8 based on the choices I'm given. I don't have more information. I don't have my graphing calculator to find the linear regression. Okay, so now some more application. I either have to make a scatter plot or they give me one. It says draw a line of best fit. Again, if you make your blob around this thing and then try to go through the middle of the blob, we're somewhere in there, okay? It's not perfect. I didn't use a straight edge, but I feel pretty good. It may be a little bit too high, so I'm gonna move it down just a little bit and try to go through the middle of the points as much as you can. It says describe the correlation. I would call this positive because I know it's getting bigger, and it would be moderate correlation or moderately strong. There's a line you can tell there. And then use your line to predict. $15. So I go to the dollars and I go up to my line and over, and that would be 60 people. And then it says 70 people. I need to figure out my scale. So this is my scale. 70 is right here. And that would be about $20. And there's a little bit of room there. It says, what is the slope and y-intercept of the line of regression? Well, the y-intercept, we'll start out with that. So y equals mx plus b. The y-intercept is about 10. And for the slope, I'm going to make a triangle. I'm going to try to get it on a couple points so I can do the rise and the run. So the rise is 10, 20, 30, 40. And the run is to here, which is halfway between 10 and 15, which is 12.5. So the rise is 40, the run is 12.5. I can divide those and get an actual answer, or a decimal value, or I can put that in my calculator and change it to a fraction. Parabola is the last thing we did, quadratics. These are the 4 basic questions we can ask. What is the height at the start? So I'm looking for height, and the key is right here at the start. That's when time is 0. And it's always this C value. So I know this thing starts and then it's going to go up from there. How long does it take to reach the maximum height? So notice maximum height is part of both of these, but how long is the time? That means I need to find the vertex. So it says t, but I'm going to use x. The vertex formula is the opposite of b over 2a. That comes out to 2. So 2 seconds is where the maximum is. That's the time. And then the actual maximum height, I'm going to plug it back in to my height equation. I'm going to find the height at 2. So this is negative 40 plus 80 plus 20. So that's 100 minus 40, which is 60. So it actually doesn't even fit on my graph. It's somewhere up in here. So this thing's going to go up to here, and it's going to come down over here somewhere. So the last question is, when does the object hit the ground? That's a time because of when. Hits the ground when the height is 0. So negative 10t squared plus 40t plus 20 equals 0. Now right away I see I can take out, I'm going to take out a negative 10 out of all of these. I'm going to divide everything by negative 10 just to make my answer a little bit nicer. I still have 0, and I have t squared minus 4t minus 2. So that's my equation when I simplify it. And so I need to solve it. Sometimes I can factor it. I know this one doesn't factor, so I'm going to do the quadratic formula. Opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c. Now, one thing you can do to help yourself out is to write a, b, and c out first. Make sure you don't screw that up. So I have 4 plus or minus square root of 24 over 2. Square root of 24 is not a nice number. It's not a perfect square. It's close to 5, but it's not quite equal to 5. I'm going to do it on a calculator. So the square root of 24 is, says 2 radical 6, but I'm going to hit the double arrow, so I get about 4.9. So I have 4 plus or minus 4.9 over 2. I have to use the positive version because I don't want a negative time. So I'm going to have 8.9 divided by 2, which is 4.45. So it's actually going to hit right over there. Final things to think about. Finish all your weekly reviews. If you need them, they're on Canvas. You can print them or just work them out on paper and turn them in. The final exam review sheet, the worksheet we have in class, the answer key is on Canvas. Do that and check it. The best way to get ready for a math test is do math problems. We don't have a ton of them, so and if you're watching this video, hopefully to go with this paper. The other thing you can do on your Khan Academy, some of you have some older missing assignments, but I put a couple reviews for systems on there. You really want to be good at systems and make sure you know how to solve elimination, substitution, and graphing. Okay? A couple other things to think about. When you go to solve a system and you get parallel lines, they don't intersect, there's no solution. When you get the same line and they graph right on top of each other, that's an infinite solution. Same thing happens when you're solving algebraically. If you get down to the end and it says 0 equals 0, well, that's a true statement, so that's the same as infinite solutions. If you get something like 0 equals 5, all the variables are gone, you know that's no solution because it's not true. So it goes along with that. There's a 20 minutes. Hopefully you take that time to review and practice doing some problems. You'll do fine on this final.